From The National, this is Trending Middle East. I'm Yasmin Al-Taji. It's Wednesday, October 8th. Here are today's headlines. A new obstacle to peace is taking root in Gaza, this time in the form of local militias. Many Palestinians say they're as dangerous as Israeli troops. For months, Gazans have spoken about the rise of armed groups led by figures such as Yasser Abu Shabab, who filled a power vacuum left by 2 years of war. Now, these small armed gangs have become organized militias. They patrol neighborhoods and clash with fighters from Hamas, which has ruled Gaza since 2007. According to witnesses and human rights groups, some have attacked hospitals and handed over Palestinians to Israeli forces. For nearly 2 decades, Hamas kept control through a powerful apparatus that had little patience and left little room for such armed groups. But with Israel's war, the displacement of thousands of Gazans, and the collapse of government, Hamas's grip has loosened. In its place, militias have emerged, many claiming to defend, quote, humanitarian zones for Gazans to shelter from violence. But civilians say these groups often bring fear rather than provide protection. 2 years into the war, a tentative ceasefire plan is on the table, but it remains slow-moving. There's been another bout of fighting between Kurdish-led forces in Syria and forces of the central government in Damascus. They reached a fast truce, but it's a sign of continuing tension in the country. Syrian Defense Minister Murhaf Abu Qasra said he had agreed to a, quote, comprehensive ceasefire with the commander of the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces on all fronts in northeastern Syria. That happened during a meeting in Damascus on Tuesday afternoon. The ceasefire came after a night of intense clashes in Aleppo, the first major urban warfare between the two sides since the new government came to power. The National's Khaled Yacoub Oweis reports from Damascus.
The center of the new hostilities has been Aleppo, Syria's second city and its business capital, where the Kurds are concentrated in 2 neighborhoods, Ashrafiyya and Sheikh Maqsoud. Residents said that these 2 neighborhoods came overnight under attack by government artillery, and a Kurdish force stationed there called Al-Ashayish, which is part of the Syrian Democratic Forces, hit back with heavy machine guns.
Tension has been brewing for days in Aleppo, which is home to tens of thousands of Kurds and had a population of more than 2 million in 2010 before the civil war broke out a year later.
A U.S. brokered truce came into effect as part of American efforts to contain the wider problem between the government and the SDF. U.S. envoy Thomas Barak, violence against the country's minorities since HTS came to power, particularly on the coast against the Alawites, in southern Syria against the Druze, have rallied more Kurds behind the SDF. And the SDF is basically refusing to disband.
A U.S. brokered arrangement for the Kurdish forces to withdraw from the neighborhoods has repeatedly failed. The militia had initially said it was there for defense purposes. The latest ceasefire comes amid renewed U.S. efforts to revive a March 10 deal between President Ahmed al-Shara and Mazloum Abdi, head of the SDF. It's maintained its control of large parts of northern Syria, northern and eastern Syria, despite regime change. Syria has a long road ahead, particularly in the infrastructure sphere and rebuilding after more than a decade of civil war. In France, some have spotted an opportunity. Last week, representatives of 42 French companies traveled to Damascus to meet President Ahmed al-Shara and senior Syrian officials.
It's been interesting to watch because France has been trying to position itself as Syria's most important European interlocutor in the past year.
The National's Sunniva reports.
You may remember Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara's visit to Paris in May, France lobbying for EU sanctions on Syria to be lifted very publicly, and that took place in June. It was shortly followed by US sanctions lifting. So this really paved the way for the visit of 42 French companies last week to Damascus.
Since the fall of the Assad regime last year, restrictions on car imports have been eased, triggering a surge in vehicles and in foreign businessmen. Now, one of them is hoping to win contracts to build 37 bridges across Syria at an estimated value of about $200 million US.
So I was able to speak at length to one of the delegation's members, Philippe Matière, and he was one of the few who already knew Syria because he'd been approached to build bridges after the 2023 earthquake. So at the time he had a deal for 16 bridges, and he'd secured Saudi funding, but that fell through because of the October 7 attacks against Israel. But the fact that he had been working on that meant that he was able to hit the ground running when sanctions were fully lifted.
After 14 years of civil war, rebuilding in Syria will cost an estimated $400 billion.
The biggest question, though, is financing. France is in a tight budget situation and a political crisis, so we can't expect French state funding. So Matière hopes to get Saudi funding again. He says Gulf funders want to co-fund with big international donors like the European Reconstruction Bank for Development or the World Bank. There are other big French companies in the delegations that were in Damascus last week, like waste management company Suez, defense multinational Thales, as well as companies specialized in the health sector, so possibly looking at rehabilitating hospitals. There's likely more contracts in the works there, so I'd say watch this space.
That's all for this morning's headlines. You can get these stories and follow our live coverage at thenationalnews.com. And before you go, we'd like to ask you for your help. Trending Middle East has been nominated for a Signal Listener's Choice Award. If you like the work we do, head to the link in our show notes and cast your vote. We appreciate your support. Yasmin Al-Taji, The National.